भावयामि रघुरामं भव्यसुगुणारामं भावयामि रघुरामं भव्यसुगुणारामं.
In the Quran, the story of Moses versus Pharaoh is told much as it is in the Hebrew and Christian Bibles. Moses is sent by God, or Allah, to secure the release of the Israelites from Egypt.
Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, let my people go.
Pharaoh, who remains unnamed and thus representative of all pharaohs, dismisses the signs of God as mere magic and sorcery and insists on his own divinity instead. After repeated conversions and lapses into disbelief, he then pursues Moses and the Israelites into the sea. It is there that God saves the true believers and destroys the infidels. The moral of the story? Pharaoh is a uniquely Egyptian example of the arrogance of one who rejects God. By extension, the monuments and ruins of the Pharaonic age stand as testament to the fate of those who defy Allah when He reveals Himself. For most Muslims, then, Pharaoh was the embodiment of what was known as Jahiliyyah, the pre-Islamic age of ignorance, paganism, tribalism, hedonism, and indulgence. In other words, to look upon the material ruins of the pharaohs with favor was to pass a positive judgment upon one who defies Allah. The biblical story of Moses versus Pharaoh was what the Muslim masses consumed. If they knew only one thing about the pyramids and obelisks, that was it: that the men who built them were pagan heretics who had defied God. As such, there was only one lesson to be gained from contemplation of their ruins: the dire fate which awaits all unbelievers. In the year 1251, Jamal al-Din al-Idrisi, a traveler from the Abbasid Caliphate, offered praise to God for creating, quote, those imposing signs, the pyramids, that, even if silent, speak with the worthiest lessons for consideration. What were those lessons? That Muslims must, quote, travel the earth and see what happened to those who disbelieved. To the Muslim masses, then, the ruins in their midst were religious warnings, the homes of malevolent pagan spirits, or convenient fertilizer, but they were not celebrated monuments of any civilization palatable to their ears. By contrast, both Western elites and Westernized Ottoman elites were committed to the preservation and veneration of artifacts from the pre-Islamic past throughout the Middle East. This commitment was designed to validate and celebrate their collective identity as modern and scientific, in direct opposition to the supposedly backward and unenlightened masses over whom they ruled. But unless they worked in the tourist industry, most of the illiterate and poverty-stricken Muslim commoners of the Middle East were not even vaguely aware of the Western historical narrative that had been imposed upon their lands by their own rulers. As a result, the westernized elites of Egypt made a concerted effort to foist upon their own subjects the Western version of Egyptian history to which they themselves now subscribed. New government buildings were adorned in the artistic motifs of ancient Egypt, and the iconography of pyramids and obelisks were disseminated throughout public spaces, such as on postal stamps and street names. One of the most prominent examples can be seen in the Cairo train station, through which the majority of the Egyptian populace will pass at one time or another. Not only does the very name of the station itself, Ramses Station, pay tribute to an ancient pharaoh, but the halls inside are also bedecked in a painstakingly reconstructed decor, one that would have made Ramses himself blush. By the 1930s, this government-led secular push was joined by writers and filmmakers, inspired by the Western vision for a modern identity intertwined with the pharaonic past. Egyptian artists proceeded to weave mummies, pharaohs, and pyramids into their novels and films. For the first time, They produced Arabic literature and screenplays featuring plotlines and dramatic themes that were drawn from the Egyptomania pulp fiction craze of the Victorian era. In order to appeal to a radically different domestic audience, however, these themes were reworked to reflect the concerns of an educated Egyptian elite. For instance, when mummies come back to life in Western stories, they do so in order to take revenge on all of mankind, blind to all distinctions of nation and race. In the Egyptian versions, however, mummies only chase after foreigners, leaving their supposed descendants, modern Egyptians, free to run the country on their own. Patriotic mummies made for good theater, but so did Moses vs. Pharaoh. Which version of the pharaonic past would prevail? The answer? Whichever one succeeded in delivering peace and prosperity to the land. Western-educated Egyptian elites promised to make their country great again through secular reforms and alliances with Western infidel nations, along with a vibrant tourist industry. By contrast, Muslim religious leaders were convinced that the only path to greatness was through a revival of eternal values enshrined in the Quran. Among the Muslim masses, the Quran continued to evince an appeal unmatched by that peddled by the more secular and westernized elites. After all, one did not have to be wealthy or educated in order to access the Quranic teachings. The rulers of Egypt might send their sons to Oxford and take vacations in Mediterranean villas, but their subjects needed only to walk into the nearest mosque for confirmation of their worth. Here, through the promise of eternal salvation to all, they could obtain the social equality and economic liberation denied them in life. In 1928, a man named Hassan al-Banna took this message and used it to recruit followers into a new grassroots organization, the Muslim Brotherhood. According to al-Banna, the Brotherhood promised to reverse the political and economic humiliation visited upon his Egyptian brethren over the past century. Al-Banna gave talks at factories and labor camps where he saw the suffering of Egyptians firsthand. "We are weary of this life of humiliation and restriction," they told him. "We see that the Arabs and the Muslims have no status and no dignity. They are mere hirelings belonging to the foreigners." According to al-Banna, more than 60% of the Egyptian populace lived below the subsistence level, a moral stain that he placed squarely on the shoulders of the secular westernized elite. Before long, al-Banna discovered a rallying cry that transcended the boundaries of Egypt and appealed to Muslims throughout the Middle East: Palestine. Membership in the Brotherhood began to soar. Al-Banna's views on history and culture were a direct refutation of those promoted by the westernized rulers of Egypt. Though he claimed to be interested in the age of the pharaohs and welcomed study of their scientific accomplishments, he vowed to resist with all our strength the program that seeks to recreate ancient Egypt after God gave Egypt the teachings of Islam and provided her with honor and glory beyond the ancient past. More specifically, it was the honor and glory of the Islamic caliphates that he sought to recreate in the present, for they had risen to power after God rescued his followers from, quote, "the filth of paganism, the rubbish of polytheism, and the habits of the pagan age." In working toward his goals, Hassan al-Banna did not advocate the use of violence, but others did. In 1949, al-Banna was shot and killed as he left a youth group gathering in Cairo. More radical leaders then took over his movement, including a man by the name of Sayyid Qutb. Qutb, once an avid consumer of secular and literary presentations of the Pharaonic age, later came to reject them after a disillusioning course of study at Stanford. Upon his return to Egypt, Qutb warned his followers that the age of Jahiliyyah, pre-Islamic heathen ignorance, had once again taken over the world, and that the materialistic West and its running dogs in the Middle East were to blame. Though a failed assassination plot led to Qutb's execution in 1966, his strident influence has lived on. One of his brother's followers later became a key mentor to Osama bin Laden and was instrumental in the rise of the terrorist organization Al-Qaeda. More generally, it is remarkable to see how the ideas and concepts that once animated the activities of the historical Indiana Jones continue to emerge in the present-day politics of the Middle East. After all, it was Western archaeologists and scholars who played a leading role in the rehabilitation and celebration of the once long-forgotten pharaohs. Not everyone in Egypt was appreciative of their efforts, however. The clearest demonstration of this came in 1981 with the assassination of the Egyptian president Anwar Sadat. During the attack, one of the gunmen, an Islamic fundamentalist serving in the military, shouted out, "I have killed Pharaoh." Indiana Jones may be gone, but Pharaoh is still used as a pejorative label for any Muslim who follows in his ideological footsteps. More recently, during the Egyptian elections of 2012, the Muslim Brotherhood managed to capture the majority of the popular vote for the first time. Less than a year after its candidate for president took office, however, a military coup returned a more secular politician to power, one with many years of experience in British and American institutions. The battle of Moses versus Pharaoh continues, with casualties on both sides. The West tends to back Pharaoh in all his Middle Eastern incarnations, while the Muslim masses tend to back his more fundamentalist rivals. And yet neither has proven capable of recreating the honor and glory of their promised golden ages. The ancient Egyptian pharaohs on the one hand, and the ancient Islamic caliphs on the other. Though Western archaeologists no longer call the shots, the war against his legacy lives on in much of the region. The time has now come to shift our focus to the other side of the world, to a land where art and antiquities were treated very differently than in Europe and the Middle East. Please join us next time as we explore the treasures of China in episode 12 of Indiana Jones in History.
Raghuramam bhavya sugunaramam bhavayami Raghuramam bhavya sugunaramam